Have you ever had that strange ache when you're doing everything you're supposed to, yet some part of you still feels hollow? You follow the routines, meet the deadlines, even chase the dreams they told you would make life meaningful. But beneath all that movement, there's a quiet, persistent voice whispering that you're not doing enough, or worse, that you are not enough. It's subtle. It creeps in when you scroll through perfect lives online, or when someone else seems to succeed effortlessly while you're barely holding things together. We often think the problem lies in our effort, our discipline, our willpower. But what if the problem isn't you at all? What if you've been measuring your worth using someone else's ruler, one designed to keep you forever chasing, never arriving? In a world constantly demanding that we prove ourselves, it becomes easy to forget that you were never meant to compete. You were meant to connect, to deepen, to grow inward. This video is an invitation not to work harder, but to listen more closely, to stop chasing every voice outside and start tuning in to the one within. Because maybe what's missing isn't out there. Maybe it's just waiting to be remembered. To understand how we arrived at this place, this persistent feeling of lack, we need to look at the systems we've been silently living inside. It's not just about social media or productivity culture. It's about how these modern structures rewire what we compare ourselves to, and how they shape the stories we tell ourselves about what it means to be enough. Let's begin there. We used to compare ourselves to our neighbors, the ones we saw once a week at the grocery store or the coffee shop down the street. Those comparisons were imperfect but grounded. They were limited by physical proximity and real-world interaction. But now, we're no longer comparing ourselves to a handful of people. We're comparing ourselves to thousands. Every scroll exposes us to curated moments of success, beauty, productivity, and joy, each one whispering, "You should be more like this." This isn't just social media's fault, though it plays a leading role. The problem is deeper. Our minds weren't designed to process this volume of comparison. Evolution taught us to measure our value through social feedback, but when that feedback becomes a constant stream of perfection, our internal compass starts to malfunction. We begin to confuse visibility with worth and performance with identity. It becomes nearly impossible to feel enough when we're always measuring against the most polished versions of other people's lives. Worse still, these comparisons don't just affect our sense of self, they alter our behavior. We begin to mimic what we think is desirable, bending ourselves into shapes that might be approved by others, but feel alien to us. Authenticity gives way to performance. Stillness becomes a threat. Reflection feels like wasted time in a world obsessed with output. This cycle is self-reinforcing. The more we compare, the more anxious we feel. The more anxious we feel, the more we seek external validation to soothe the discomfort. Likes become micro-rewards. Shares feel like endorsements of our existence. But all of this is built on sand, fleeting, unstable, and deeply disconnected from who we really are. The tragedy is that these external metrics often replace our inner ones before we even notice. We stop asking, "Do I feel aligned?" and start asking, "Did it get enough engagement?" In doing so, we abandon the quiet spaces inside ourselves where real self-worth is built, not by outperforming others, but by honoring what is true for us. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can we do that if our attention is constantly hijacked by who everyone else appears to be? If we're always looking outward, we lose the ability to look inward, to recognize what brings us alive, what grounds us, what makes us whole. But if the modern world has distorted how we see ourselves, it has also blurred where we believe emptiness comes from. We're conditioned to think we feel this way because something out there is missing: status, recognition, success. Yet what if that emptiness isn't caused by what's absent externally, but by what we've lost touch with internally? Let's explore that next. Most of us are taught to believe that if we feel something is missing, we need to go out and find it. We chase after careers, relationships, experiences, each one a promised answer to that quiet question inside. What will finally make me feel whole? But what if that question is flawed from the start? What if the feeling of emptiness isn't a signal that we lack something external, but that we've lost something internal? There's a quiet illusion that governs modern life, the idea that fulfillment can be accumulated, that if we just stack enough achievements, possessions, or admiration, the gnawing will subside. But the truth is more unsettling, because real fulfillment doesn't work like that. You can check every box, win every award, even be loved by many, and still feel like you're standing in a room echoing with silence. This kind of emptiness doesn't come from failure. In fact, it often shows up most loudly after moments of outward success, because success, when it isn't rooted in self-understanding, can amplify the distance between how we appear and how we feel. And when those two realities drift too far apart, we begin to feel like imposters in our own lives. The world around us doesn't help. It's filled with noise, endless voices telling us who we should be, what we should want, how we should live. But amid all this noise, something critical goes unheard: our own voice. Over time, we stop noticing its absence. We stop checking in with ourselves, not just about goals or decisions, but about the deeper things. Do I feel connected to what I'm doing? Is this version of me truly mine? We start living as if we're passengers in our own story, drifting from one obligation to the next, seeking brief highs to distract from a dull ache we can't name. And perhaps the reason we can't name it is because we're asking the wrong questions. We ask, what do I need to do to feel better? When perhaps we should be asking, what part of me have I abandoned to get here? There's a certain kind of pain that comes from self-betrayal, not dramatic, not loud, but deeply corrosive. It's the pain of knowing, deep down, that we've traded parts of ourselves for approval, convenience, or safety. And the more we do this, the more fragmented we become. Over time, the self that once felt whole starts to feel like a collage of roles and expectations, none of which truly reflect who we are. This isn't to say that external goals are meaningless, but when they become substitutes for internal clarity, they leave us chasing shadows. True nourishment doesn't come from adding more. It comes from realignment, from slowing down long enough to listen for what's been silenced, from asking, not what the world wants from you, but what you genuinely need to feel alive. You might be surprised by how quiet that answer is. It won't scream. It won't compete. But it will wait for the moment you finally stop running, turn inward, and make space for it again. So, if this emptiness is rooted not in what we lack, but in what we've forgotten, how do we begin to reconnect? How do we move from fragmentation to wholeness, from performance to presence? For that, we turn to thinkers who've spent their lives exploring the inner world: Jung, Erich Fromm, and others who understood that real power doesn't come from control, it comes from integration. Let's see what they can teach us. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is not just a poetic insight, it's a call to responsibility. For Jung, the path to wholeness wasn't about becoming someone new, but about reclaiming the parts of ourselves we've pushed into shadow. the pieces we've labeled as weak, unlovable, or inconvenient, the desires we've silenced to fit in, the fears we've denied to appear strong. At the heart of Jung's work is the process of individuation, the slow, often painful journey of becoming who we truly are by integrating all aspects of the self, even the ones we'd rather hide. It's the opposite of the comparison-driven life we explored earlier, where the world tells us to construct a persona polished for approval. Jung invites us to dismantle that mask and meet what lies beneath. And what lies beneath is not always easy. There's anger, shame, longing, vulnerability, but there's also authenticity, clarity, and a quiet kind of power that doesn't need to prove itself. Jung believed that wholeness is not perfection, it is complexity held together, not a single identity, but a harmony of contradictions made conscious. Erich Fromm, another towering thinker, adds a vital dimension to this. In his book, To Have or to Be, Fromm contrasts two modes of living. The having mode defines life through possession, what we own, control, accumulate. It's the mode most of modern society operates in. But the being mode is different. It's rooted in presence, in experiencing rather than owning, in relating rather than consuming. To live in the being mode is to shift from what can I get from this to how can I be with this. Fromm believed that modern emptiness arises because we've built lives around having status, things, even relationships, without cultivating the deeper capacity simply to be, to feel, to remain open, even when we're not performing. This is where real inner power emerges, not from dominance or visibility, but from integration and depth. It's the kind of power that can sit in silence without fear. That doesn't need constant validation to feel real. That's not afraid to question itself, because it knows its worth isn't fragile, it's rooted. Both Jung and Fromm believed that fulfillment is not an achievement, it's a return, a remembering of what we already are when we're not fragmented by fear or shaped by approval. They saw that the journey inward is not a retreat from life, but the only way to truly meet it. Of course, this journey is not quick. It's not as gratifying as a dopamine hit or a viral post. It requires patience, solitude, and a willingness to confront the uncomfortable. But it offers something no external reward can, a life that feels like yours. Because when you begin to see and accept your whole self, not just the parts that shine in public, you no longer live at the mercy of comparison. You no longer chase wholeness outside yourself. You carry it with you, quietly, firmly, and no one can take that from you. But if this kind of self-connection is so vital, so deeply transformative, why does it feel so distant in daily life? The answer is both simple and difficult. We've forgotten how to practice it. In our final section, we'll look at how to begin that practice, not as a self-help technique, but as a quiet act of self-return. Let's explore how to rebuild inner strength through small, grounded shifts. Reconnecting with yourself doesn't require dramatic life changes or a sudden break from the world. It begins in much smaller moments, the ones we usually overlook, the spaces between noise. Rebuilding inner strength is not about force, it's about remembering. And remembering requires slowing down enough to hear what has been silenced. One of the simplest yet most powerful ways to begin is to reintroduce stillness into your life. Not the performative kind of stillness, where we sit to meditate and secretly wait for it to work, but the kind that welcomes discomfort without rushing to fix it. Even 5 minutes of true quiet each day, without distraction, without screens, can reveal just how crowded our minds have become. In that silence, something honest begins to stir. It might not feel pleasant at first, but it will feel real. Journaling can deepen this, not as a task, but as a dialogue, a way of asking yourself, what am I really feeling? And then allowing the answer to arrive uncensored. There's something about seeing your own thoughts in handwriting that makes them feel more tangible, more grounded. Over time, you begin to notice patterns. You begin to hear which voices are truly yours, and which ones you've inherited without question. Another practice is intentional solitude. We're often surrounded by people, tasks, and digital echoes of others, but solitude, the deliberate act of being alone without filling the space, is different. It allows your inner world to breathe. It teaches you that you can be enough in your own presence, that your value doesn't need to be proven or witnessed to exist. Living more slowly is also an act of resistance. Our culture rewards acceleration, but depth doesn't grow in speed. When you begin to walk instead of scroll, listen instead of react, observe instead of perform, you start to recover the lost rhythm of being. You begin to notice the texture of your life again, the feel of morning light, the weight of a deep breath, the emotion behind a passing thought. These are the things that build real connection with yourself and with the world around you. And finally, ask better questions. Not how can I fix myself, but what parts of me have I forgotten to love? Not what do I need to do, but what do I need to feel? These questions don't always yield immediate answers, but they change the direction of your attention. They open doors instead of building cages. This is not about becoming perfectly self-aware or detached from the world. It's about becoming anchored. When you're anchored in your own inner truth, you're less swayed by every passing trend, every judgment, every external storm. You begin to live from the inside out, not the outside in. You'll still face moments of doubt. You'll still feel the pull of comparison. But the difference is, you'll know where to return to. You'll have a home inside yourself that isn't built on applause or achievement. And once you've found that, the world becomes less overwhelming because you're no longer trying to extract from it something it was never meant to give. We live in a time where it's easy to feel like you're falling behind, even when you're doing everything right. But maybe the goal isn't to win at a game that was never designed for your well-being. Maybe the real path forward is learning to step out of that game entirely and return to yourself. This isn't about retreating from life. It's about finally choosing a life that feels honest, quiet, steady, and real. The emptiness you've been carrying isn't a flaw to be fixed. It's a signal, a doorway, a gentle nudge back towards something you've known all along but may have forgotten, that who you are, beneath all the noise, is already enough. So start there, with silence, with a question, with one honest page in a journal, or one moment of stillness where you don't try to change anything. Start small, but start. And if this video gave you something to hold on to, I invite you to share a comment below. Sometimes, just writing a few honest words can be the beginning of something new, for you and for someone else who might read it. If you'd like to keep exploring this kind of depth, slow, thoughtful, and quietly transformative, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you want to be gently reminded when a new reflection arrives, turn on the bell. You don't have to chase yourself anymore. You're already here. And that's enough.